Satanism, drug references. These albums had it all. Some got censored, others got banned worldwide. But one was so offensive, even the band had to apologize. Stay with me, because this one is wild. 20. If you can believe your eyes and ears, the Mamas and the Papas, 1966. A toilet. Yes, a simple toilet got this album banned. Seems ridiculous, right? But in 1966, even the suggestion of bathroom activities was scandalous. Stores refused to stock it unless the cover was changed. And that's just the beginning of this bizarre story. The Mamas and the Papas were one of the biggest folk rock groups of the 60s, known for hits like California Dreamin' and Monday Monday. Their debut album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, was a massive success, but its original cover featured the band sitting in a bathtub with a visible toilet. Now, in today's world, this might seem like nothing, but in 1966, showing a toilet on an album cover was considered indecent and offensive. Yes, really. Retailers refused to sell the album unless the cover was altered. Some versions had a sticker slapped over the toilet, while others cropped it out entirely. The controversy didn't stop the album from becoming a hit, but it proved one thing: censorship was alive and well in the 60s, even for something as harmless as a bathroom fixture. Biggest twist? The album didn't just face controversy, it actually became the first #1 album to be censored over a toilet. 19. Beggar's Banquet, The Rolling Stones, 1968. The Rolling Stones had always pushed boundaries, but this time it wasn't sex or drugs, it was graffiti in a bathroom. Their 1968 album Beggar's Banquet was nearly delayed indefinitely just because of its cover, and the reason why will leave you stunned. The original cover was a dirty public restroom wall covered in graffiti with scribbled phrases like Bob Dylan's Dream and Rolling Stones. It fit the band's rebellious image, but record executives weren't having it. They insisted on changing it to something more elegant.
What's the glee while you kings and queens fall for 10 decades for the God?
The Stones refused. Mick Jagger even called the clean alternative boring beyond belief. But in the end, the label won. The album was released with a plain white cover that looked more like a wedding invitation than a rock album. But here's where it gets crazy. Years later, Beggar's Banquet is now celebrated as one of the greatest albums in rock history. And the original band cover? It's now considered an iconic piece of rock memorabilia. Most shocking part? The rejected cover was finally restored decades later. Turns out, what was offensive in 1968 is now considered classic rock history. 18. The Velvet Underground and Nico. The Velvet Underground, 1967. Andy Warhol's Banana. Innocent on the surface, right? Wrong. This album's artwork was just the beginning of its controversy. Lawsuits, censorship, and drugs made it one of the most controversial albums of all time.
It's just a restless feeling.
But there's one twist most people don't know about. When the Velvet Underground and Nico dropped in 1967, nobody was ready for it. The album, produced by Warhol, featured a peelable banana sticker on the cover. Fans could literally peel it off to reveal a pinkish, flesh-colored fruit underneath. Subtle, but highly suggestive. And that's not even the biggest scandal. The album's back cover included a projected image of actor Eric Emerson. Here's where it gets wild. Emerson didn't approve his likeness being used. He sued the band, forcing the label to pull all copies from shelves immediately. But here's the irony. The album flopped at first. Then, years later, it became one of the most influential records in music history. What's the craziest part? The original copies with Eric Emerson's face are now worth thousands, turning a legal headache into a collector's gold mine. 17. Blind Faith. Blind Faith, 1969. One album cover was so disturbing that even its own band members regretted releasing it. It wasn't drugs, it wasn't violence, it was a topless 11-year-old girl. In 1969, Blind Faith, a supergroup featuring Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood, released their debut album. The music? Incredible. But the album cover? Highly controversial. It featured a young girl holding a silver spaceship-like object standing topless. The band claimed it was symbolic of innocence and progress, representing the excitement of the technological age. But the public didn't see it that way. Outrage spread fast. Some countries outright banned the cover, while others released an alternate version featuring the band instead. Years later, Eric Clapton admitted that he was uncomfortable with the image, but by then, the damage had been done. The wildest fact? Despite the backlash, Blind Faith became the first supergroup album to reach #1 on the charts, proving controversy sometimes sells. 16. Yesterday and Today, The Beatles, 1966. Imagine walking into a record store and seeing the Beatles smiling in butcher coats, holding decapitated baby dolls and slabs of raw meat. Sounds like a horror movie, right? But this was the original cover of Yesterday and Today, and it caused an absolute firestorm. Released in 1966 as a North American exclusive, the album was meant to capitalize on the Beatles' growing fame.
There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday.
But the cover? A complete marketing disaster. It was supposed to be a statement on war and violence, but instead, it horrified record stores, parents, and even some fans. Capitol Records panicked. The backlash was so severe that they ordered a massive recall of 750,000 copies, one of the biggest in music history. The solution? A safe, boring photo of the band sitting around a trunk. But some butcher covers had already been shipped, and some fans managed to peel off the replacement cover, revealing the disturbing original underneath. Today, if you find one of these unaltered copies, it could be worth over $125,000. The biggest twist? The Beatles themselves never intended for the cover to be released. It was a creative decision gone horribly wrong. Yet today, it's one of the most legendary and valuable records ever made. 15. Electric Ladyland, The Jimi Hendrix Experience, 1968. Jimi Hendrix hated this album cover, but that didn't stop it from becoming one of the most banned and controversial of all time. Electric Ladyland is a rock masterpiece, but in the UK, the album came with a shocking cover. 19 fully nude women staring seductively at the camera. It wasn't artistic, it wasn't subtle. It was blunt, raw, and provocative. Hendrix was furious. He called the cover tasteless and disrespectful, saying it didn't represent his music at all. But the record label ignored his protests and released it anyway. The backlash was instant.
For you, so don't you be late.
Major record stores refused to stock it, and even places that sold it often hid it behind counters or in brown paper bags. Meanwhile, in the US, a completely different, far less scandalous cover, a simple close-up of Hendrix's face, was used instead. Despite the controversy, Electric Ladyland became one of the greatest rock albums of all time. And here's the kicker. Original copies of the band UK cover are now worth a fortune. The wildest part? The album itself became Jimi Hendrix's most famous work, but he never wanted that cover, proving that sometimes controversy sells, even against an artist's will. 14. Their Satanic Majesty's Request, The Rolling Stones, 1967. What happens when one of the biggest bands in the world flirts with Satanism? You get an album so controversial that some stores refused to sell it, and even hardcore fans were left scratching their heads. By 1967, the Rolling Stones were already known for pushing boundaries, but their Satanic Majesty's Request took things to another level. The title alone, suggesting allegiance to the devil, was enough to spark outrage. But it wasn't just the name. The album's psychedelic, otherworldly sound was seen as drug-fueled madness, and rumors swirled that the band was dabbling in the occult. The cover didn't help either. It featured the band in an eerie, surreal 3D-style photograph mimicking the Beatles' Sgt. But with a sinister twist. Some saw hidden symbols, others saw dark messages, and religious groups called for a ban. Despite, or maybe because of the controversy, the album sold well, but many fans were confused by the shift in style. Even the Stones themselves later admitted it wasn't their best work. The biggest twist? Mick Jagger later laughed off the Satanism claim, saying it was just a joke. But by then, the legend had already taken on a life of its own. 13. We're only in it for the money. The Mothers of Invention. 1968. Imagine mocking the most famous album of all time and nearly getting sued for it. That's exactly what Frank Zappa did with We're Only in It for the Money, and it made record executives furious. In 1968, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles was a global phenomenon. But Frank Zappa? He wasn't impressed. He saw the hippie movement as a commercial gimmick and he wanted to expose it. So what did he do? He created an album cover that directly parodied Sgt. Pepper's, right down to the colorful outfits and crowded group photo. But here's the problem. The Beatles record label wasn't laughing. Zappa was forced to change the cover before the album could even be released. But that wasn't the only controversy. His lyrics attacked everything from government corruption to hippie hypocrisy, and radio stations flat out refused to play it. Despite the censorship, the album became a cult classic, and many fans now consider it one of Zappa's greatest works. The most ironic part? An album that mocked corporate rock was almost destroyed by corporate rock itself. Yet decades later, it's seen as a masterpiece of rebellion. 12. Strange Days. The Doors. 1967. A circus freak show as an album cover? That alone was enough to make people uncomfortable. But when Strange Days hit the shelves in 1967, the real controversy wasn't just about how it looked, it was about how it sounded. Jim Morrison and the Doors were already known for dark, poetic, and rebellious music, but this album took things even further. It was eerie, trippy, and filled with lyrics about alienation, madness, and drugs. Some called it a masterpiece, while others called it disturbing and dangerous. The album cover didn't help. It featured a group of carnival performers, a midget, a strongman, and a juggler, all posing on a grimy New York street. Many stores refused to display it, calling it too unsettling. But Morrison insisted that it reflected the world he saw. Strange, chaotic, and beautiful. Then there was the biggest controversy of all, the song People Are Strange. Many critics believed Morrison was romanticizing depression and drug use, leading some radio stations to ban the track entirely. The most mind-blowing part? Despite the backlash, Strange Days is now considered one of the Doors' greatest albums, and the unsettling cover that once scared people? Today, it's an icon of psychedelic rock. 11. Aftermath. The Rolling Stones. 1966.
I said, oh no, don't you bother me no more.
The Rolling Stones were already bad boys of rock by 1966, but Aftermath was the album that made parents panic. And it wasn't just because of the music, it was because of one shocking song. The album included a track called Under My Thumb, a song about a man who completely dominates a woman. The lyrics were seen as misogynistic and degrading, and feminists raged against it. Some radio stations banned it immediately, while others were pressured to stop playing it. Then there was Mother's Little Helper, a song about housewives abusing prescription drugs. The song's dark, mocking tone made many people uncomfortable, and some stores refused to sell the album. Even the album cover caused controversy. The original US version had a blurry, distorted image of the band, which some people claimed was too suggestive. It was replaced with a cleaner, less artistic version in certain countries. The biggest shock? Despite all the bands, Aftermath became the Stones' first album to feature all original songs, proving that controversy only fueled their success. 10. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The Beatles. 1967. This wasn't just an album, it was a cultural revolution. But behind its legendary status, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band faced massive censorship battles, drug accusations, and even a governmental ban that nearly erased it from history. When the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper, it was hailed as one of the greatest albums ever made. But not everyone was thrilled. The BBC banned multiple tracks claiming they promoted drug use. The biggest offender? A Day in the Life. The lyric, "I'd love to turn you on," was seen as a direct reference to LSD, and the line, "Found my way upstairs and had a smoke," was deemed too suggestive. Then there was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Despite John Lennon's claims that it was inspired by his son's drawing, authorities believed it was a coded reference to LSD, with Lucy, Sky, and Diamonds forming the initials LSD. But the most insane controversy came from the Philippines. Director Ferdinand Marcos was furious after the Beatles refused to meet his wife, Imelda Marcos. In retaliation, their music, including Sgt. Pepper, was banned from all radio stations in the country. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, some retailers refused to sell the album due to its cover featuring controversial figures like Karl Marx and Aleister Crowley. The craziest twist? Despite being banned, censored, and pulled from shelves, Sgt. Pepper became one of the best-selling albums of all time, and every single track that was once censored is now considered a masterpiece of rock history. 9. The Who Sell Out. The Who. 1967. A rock album that pretended to be a giant commercial? That alone was controversial. But what really got the Who sellout banned, censored, and nearly sued into oblivion was a fake commercial for a real-life product, and the company's reaction was priceless. The Who structured the Who sellout like a pirate radio broadcast, complete with fake advertisements and jingles in between songs. It was meant as a parody of commercialism, but not everyone got the joke. One of the album's most infamous moments? A fake commercial for Heinz baked beans. The cover even showed Roger Daltrey sitting in a bathtub full of baked beans, which, fun fact, gave him pneumonia after sitting in cold beans for hours. But Heinz wasn't laughing. They threatened to sue the band, forcing The Who to remove the ad from later pressings of the album. Then there was Mary Ann with the Shaky Hand. Many people believed it was about female self-pleasure, leading to several radio stations banning it outright. Meanwhile, the Ono song, a fake jingle about deodorant, caused even more drama when real deodorant companies threatened legal action, fearing people might think it was real. The most unexpected outcome? Despite all the bans, lawsuits, and outrage, The Who Sells Out is now one of The Who's most beloved albums. Ironically, an album that mocked corporate music became one of the most valuable collector's items in rock history. 8. Let It Bleed. The Rolling Stones. 1969. The Rolling Stones had always pushed boundaries, but Let It Bleed was the album that made censorship boards panic. Drugs, violence, and an album cover that was way too disturbing for 1969. This one had it all. First, let's talk about the music. The album included Gimme Shelter, a song that painted a chilling picture of war, riots, and violence. With lyrics like, "Rape, murder, it's just a shot away," Some stations outright banned the track for being too intense and disturbing. Then there was Midnight Rambler, a song about a serial killer. Inspired by the real-life Boston Strangler, the song's dark, sinister lyrics led to public outrage. Some called it a glorification of violence, while others labeled it too extreme for radio. And then there was the album cover controversy. Let It Bleed featured an elaborate surreal image of a cake stacked with a film reel, a clock, and a bleeding slice. But what really freaked people out was the severed-looking doll head on top. Some retailers refused to display the album, claiming it was grotesque and disturbing. Despite all the bans, Let It Bleed became one of the most critically acclaimed albums ever. The craziest part? The album was released just days before the tragic Altamont Free concert where a fan was stabbed to death, making its violent themes feel eerily prophetic. 7. Flowers, The Rolling Stones, 1967. An album cover that looked innocent but was actually a secret insult to the band's own fans. Flowers may not be the Rolling Stones' most famous album, but it is one of their most controversial. At first glance, the cover seemed harmless, the band's faces superimposed onto flower stems. But the real issue? The album was a lazy cash grab filled with previously released material and tracks that had already appeared on other albums. Fans felt betrayed, calling it a ripoff. But the real controversy came when Mick Jagger himself admitted it. He later called Flowers a terrible album, proving that even the band didn't believe in it. Then there was the music itself. One of the most controversial songs was Backstreet Girl, which featured lyrics about a man telling his mistress to know her place. Many critics labeled it sexist, and some stations refused to play it. Meanwhile, the track Please Go Home was seen as too aggressive and sexual, leading some radio stations to censor it completely. The backlash led to Flowers being banned in multiple countries, particularly in Latin America, where record labels refused to distribute it. The most unexpected twist? Despite being hated by critics and fans alike, Flowers still became a top-selling album, proving that even a band's worst album can still be a hit. 6. The White Album, The Beatles, 1968. An album so chaotic, so dark, and so controversial that it became linked to a real-life murder spree. The White Album is one of the Beatles' most famous records, but its history is shrouded in infamy. Unlike their earlier work, this album was raw, violent, and experimental. It had everything from sweet acoustic melodies to creepy, unsettling tracks that disturbed even the band's own fans. One of the most notorious songs? Helter Skelter. What was meant to be a loud, chaotic rock song later became infamous for inspiring Charles Manson and his followers. Manson claimed the Beatles were secretly sending him messages through the album, believing it predicted a race war. After his cult committed a string of brutal murders, Helter Skelter was forever linked to the crimes. Then there was Revolution 9, an 8-minute sound collage that some believed contained hidden satanic messages when played backward. Conspiracy theorists claim it was a clue that Paul McCartney was dead, adding to the bizarre myth of Paul is dead. Religious groups also targeted the album, calling it dangerous and corrupting, leading to bans in multiple countries. The most chilling fact? Decades later, the White Album remains one of the most controversial records ever, not because of what the Beatles did, but because of the horrifying crimes it became linked to. 5. Sticky Fingers, The Rolling Stones, 1971. Yes, it was released in 1971, but the controversy started way before that, in the late 60s. This album's cover was so scandalous that multiple countries outright banned it. Designed by Andy Warhol, the cover featured a close-up of a man's crotch in tight jeans, complete with a working zipper that revealed a suggestive image underneath. In the US, it was shocking, but in countries like Spain and India, it was completely banned. To make things even wilder, there was mystery surrounding the model. For years, people thought it was Mick Jagger, but it was later revealed to be a male Warhol model whose identity remained hidden. Then there were the songs. Brown Sugar was called out for its lyrics referencing slavery, addiction, and underage relationships, a combination that sparked outrage across the world. Some stations refused to play it, while others heavily censored it. Meanwhile, tracks like Sister Morphine glorified drug use and self-destruction, leading to bans in various conservative countries. The most insane part? Despite all the backlash, Sticky Fingers became one of the Rolling Stones' most successful albums, proving that sometimes the more controversial an album is, the more people want to hear it. 4. Axis, Bold as Love, The Jimi Hendrix Experience, 1967. A musical masterpiece that sparked religious outrage. When Jimi Hendrix released Axis, Bold as Love, fans were blown away by his revolutionary guitar work. But the album cover? That's what got it banned in multiple countries. The cover featured Hendrix and his bandmates transformed into Hindu deities, specifically depicting them as forms of Vishnu. In India and other predominantly Hindu countries, this was seen as deeply disrespectful. Many felt it was blasphemous for a rock musician to be portrayed as a god, especially since Hendrix had no Hindu background. The backlash was swift.
Anger, he smiles, towering in shiny metallic purple armor.
The album was completely banned in Malaysia and other parts of Asia, and Hindu organizations protested its release. Some stores even refused to stock it, forcing the record label to issue apologies. But here's where it gets interesting. Hendrix himself had nothing to do with the cover design. He later admitted he didn't like it, saying he would have preferred something more personal, like a simple photo of the band. Despite the controversy, Axis, Bold as Love is now regarded as one of the greatest guitar albums ever made. The biggest twist? The cover caused global outrage, but today it's considered one of the most iconic album artworks in rock history, even in the very countries that originally banned it. 3. The Fugs. The Fugs, 1966. Imagine an album so raw, so rebellious, and so offensive to the establishment that it was pulled from shelves, banned by authorities, and blacklisted from radio stations across America. That album was The Fugs, a countercultural grenade thrown right into the heart of the 1960s. The Fugs were anti-war, anti-establishment, and proudly obscene.
At last night's tryst, she was wearing a flashlight strapped to her wrist.
Their lyrics tackled everything from government corruption to sexual liberation, often using words and phrases that were unheard of in public media at the time. Their 1966 self-titled album included songs like Slum Goddess, Boobs a Lot, and Kill for Peace, tracks that blended satire, vulgarity, and radical politics. The result? Mass outrage. Many stores refused to carry the album. Conservative politicians called it dangerous filth, and multiple cities banned its sale. Even the FBI reportedly monitored the band, suspecting them of inciting rebellion. The music wasn't just offensive, it was intentionally offensive, using satire to mock war, religion, and traditional values. In many ways, the Fugs were punk before punk existed, and they terrified the mainstream. Despite the bans, the group gained a cult following, and their music became anthems for the anti-war and free speech movements. The wildest part? Years later, critics would hail the Fugs as one of the most important underground albums of the 1960s. An album that wasn't just banned, it was feared. 2. A Hard Day's Night, The Beatles, 1964. An album so harmless on the surface, yet banned in multiple countries. Not because of its music, but because of politics and cultural restrictions. A Hard Day's Night was the Beatles' first soundtrack album tied to their successful film, but its international reception wasn't as smooth as their rise to fame.
And I'm home, everything seems to be right.
While the album was a massive hit in the US and Europe, some Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian countries refused to release it. The reason? The Beatles' influence on youth culture. Authorities saw them as a threat to traditional values, fearing that their style and lyrics would corrupt young minds. The censorship didn't stop there. Some conservative nations also banned images of the Beatles entirely, fearing that their long hair and rebellious attitude would encourage young people to reject authority. The album, along with their movies, was kept off the airwaves in several regions. Adding to the drama, South Africa's apartheid government also restricted Beatles music, labeling them as a disruptive influence on youth. And in 1966, John Lennon's infamous "We're more popular than Jesus" comment led to Beatles albums, including A Hard Day's Night, being burned in protests. The biggest twist? Despite these bans, A Hard Day's Night remains one of the most beloved and successful Beatles albums ever, proving that no government could stop the Beatlemania phenomenon. 1. Unfinished music number 1, Two Virgins, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, 1968. No album caused more outrage, censorship, and pure shock than this one. Unfinished music number 1, Two Virgins, wasn't banned because of its music, but because of its cover, a full frontal photograph of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. The album itself was experimental, filled with strange noises, abstract sounds, and no real songs. But it didn't matter. No one could focus on the music because the cover was so controversial. Released in 1968, the image of Lennon and Ono standing completely exposed was instantly met with outrage. Stores refused to stock it, distributors pulled it from shelves, and in some countries, the album was flat out banned. In the US, the FBI even got involved. The album was seized at customs and police raided record stores selling it. Eventually, retailers were forced to wrap it in brown paper, hiding the offensive image. But Lennon didn't back down. He defended the cover, saying it was a statement about true love and vulnerability. Of course, the public saw it differently. Most just called it disturbing and unnecessary. The most shocking part? Despite the outrage, Two Virgins became a collector's item, proving that even a banned, ridiculed album could turn into music history's most infamous piece of art. If you thought this was wild, wait till you see what's next. Click here for more insane stories from music history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.